of us believe is that there have been an increasing number of abnormalities within the last several years with respect to our elections. And we chalk some of this up to recent legislation. We chalk some of this up to changes in the way that we actually, verify the vote. And so there's some concerns. Now, I've never claimed that any of my elections were stolen. I've never claimed that elections were stolen in general. But I have said that we've got some abnormalities. We've got some things that we need to work on. And how are we going to do that? But when we talk about the way that the direction this conversation is going, I want to point something out. And that is that I'm old enough to remember, right? I'm old enough to remember when Democrats were the ones that were concerned about election integrity. And that was all pre-2020. So this idea that Democrats are pointing the fingers at conservatives saying you're just mad because you lost, there's no such thing as voter fraud, there's no such thing as this concern. I provide Exhibit A, the 2016 election, where Democrats were not only questioning whether or not it was a legitimate election, but you had some members of Congress. Listen to this. You had some members of Congress that were actually opposed to verifying the electors. I mean, I was told that that's like one step away from treason. But apparently when the Democrats wanted to do it, it was the typical thing that the press always says. It was brave, it was bold. They were, demonstrating their passion or their genuine concerns over election integrity. And what was that election integrity concern all based on? Russian interference into our election. Now, I hope everyone can agree I don't want foreign governments intervening into our election. I do think it's a little bit disingenuous for some people, especially when you consider the United States has been involved in a lot of foreign elections, to act as if, oh my gosh, this is the first time this has ever happened. Right. And when you look at the level of Russian involvement, there's a couple of things that we ended up finding out through an investigation. One was, no, there wasn't collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Two, the Russians did not put in a lot of effort for this. Right. They did some ad buys through like social media. Three, they kind of ignored all of the other countries and foreign governments that also attempted to intervene in our election in one way, shape, or form, but did so on behalf of Hillary Clinton. So again, the part I think we can all agree on is nobody wants foreign governments attempting to influence our election, right? I don't know how you stop all of that, but none of us wants that. Nobody wants somebody to get elected president because there's been some sort of overwhelming influence from a foreign power. Having said that, we know in 2016 there wasn't any overwhelming influence by a foreign power, right? That's ridiculous. But by the same token, we don't deny that foreign governments were attempting to influence our elections. They do that all the time. So again, just pointing out for some of my Democrat friends that were very concerned about election integrity in 2016 and not so concerned about it now, that, hey, you were right there not that long ago. All right. The second one, and again, if you thought that was it, it wasn't, right? I remember when Stacey Abrams was running for governor of Georgia and she lost, right? And this isn't something that probably should have been terribly shocking, that a very left-wing Democrat lost the gubernatorial election in Georgia. However, we were all told that this was a result of, definitive voter suppression. And this is kind of a distinction to some degree. When the left talks about the problem with election cycles, they're usually talking about from the perspective of, well, Republicans engage in voter suppression, or various laws are essentially akin to Jim Crow or attempting to keep minorities from voting. And part of the reason why they say this is because if you actually look back at U.S. history, you can find laws that were on the books that were specifically in place in order to prevent minorities from voting. It was typically in the Democrat-controlled Jim Crow South, right? So these were not Republican laws; these were Democrat Jim Crow laws, and they kind of took on two different versions, right? One version was laws that were inherently racist, right, or sexist. So it was laws that either prevented you from voting based off of your sex or prevented you from voting based off of your skin color, right? That's inherently racist, that's evil, and we've gotten rid of those, right? Ever since the Civil Rights Act, you cannot discriminate in that way with respect to your voting laws. The second category was laws that were not what you would call inherently racist, but they were definitely being applied in a racist manner, all right? So for instance, poll taxes or poll tests. So theoretically on the books, it looks like the poll tax applies to everybody, or it looks like the poll test applies to everybody. But then what it did, it allowed local elections officials to essentially discriminate. So the question that the white guy got was not the question that the black guy got, right? So it was things like that were again, maybe conceptually they weren't inherently racist, but they were overwhelmingly used to achieve a racist result. And again, we got rid of those during the Civil Rights Act. So there's been a lot of progress on that, but regardless of all that, Democrats still claim that voter suppression tactics still exist. And one of the biggest things that they push now is it's voter ID laws, right? Voter ID laws is another form of Jim Crow or voter suppression, et cetera, et cetera. What's fascinating is that when you poll minority people, like, again, take all the, evil white people out, just poll minority people, what do you find? 70-80% of them think that photo ID actually makes sense with respect to voting, okay? So the point here is that when the left comes out and attempts to claim that anybody that's complaining about abnormalities in voting or election fraud, when they're claiming that we're all wearing tinfoil hats, again, they were very comfortable in those same tinfoil hats when it was Hillary Clinton versus Trump, when it was Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, and so the idea now that they're going to come and try to claim that A, they're not concerned about it, and B, that they're just fighting to expand the vote, when in reality you look at the sort of legislation that they're pushing, they're mischaracterizing certain common sense legislative things like photo ID, or requiring someone to register to vote before they vote. And I don't mean like same day voter registration. I mean like having some time so the registrar can actually confirm that this is someone that's legally allowed to vote. They're now trying to claim that, well, that's voter suppression, that's Jim Crow. That leads to problems within our election cycles. So again, that's that kind of narrative.